The sound of glass shattering was the first thing I registered before I even realized I'd dropped the wine glass. Red wine spread across the white kitchen tiles like blood. Colin's voice was calm, too calm, as he slid a stack of papers across the counter toward me. "It's not working anymore, Lydia. I can't live like this." I stared at him, still wearing my bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon. My mascara was smudged from crying that morning. The man I'd loved for 8 years wouldn't even look me in the eyes. My stomach twisted when I noticed the words printed on the envelope. Divorce petition. Before I could speak, before I could even process what was happening, a voice echoed from the doorway. "Don't make this harder for him, dear," Diana said, stepping into my kitchen like she owned it. Her pearl necklace caught the light as she moved. "You must have seen this coming. A man has needs, and honestly, you haven't been yourself lately." She looked me up and down slowly, deliberately. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You've let yourself go." My chest tightened. Humiliation washed over me in waves. My husband of 8 years just stood there saying nothing. Absolutely nothing. My hands started trembling as I realized the truth. He'd brought his mother here to watch me break. And I did break, for about 5 seconds. Then something inside me turned ice cold. I woke up the next morning in an empty house. The silence was so thick it felt like it was crushing my chest. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what it felt like when this place was full of life and laughter. When it felt like home instead of a tomb. Eventually, I forced myself out of bed and walked through the rooms. That's when I noticed all the empty spaces. The spot where our wedding photo used to hang on the wall was just a rectangle of slightly darker paint. His books were gone from the shelves. His clothes were gone from the closet. Even the coffee maker he'd insisted we buy was missing from the counter. He'd taken everything that mattered to him. Everything except me. I'd been left behind like furniture he didn't want anymore. I stood in the living room, surrounded by all those empty spaces, and felt something shift inside me. Not sadness anymore. Something harder. Something colder. He wanted me to feel worthless. His mother wanted me to feel ashamed. But standing there in that empty house, I made a decision. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. Not anymore. Colin's lawyer called 3 days after he'd moved out. Her voice was professional and cold as she explained the timeline. "Mr. Monroe filed for divorce 2 weeks ago," she said. "The papers you received were just a formality. Everything's already been processed. 2 weeks ago." That meant he'd been planning this long before he'd brought his mother to watch me sign those papers. Long before he'd looked me in the eyes and said it wasn't working. He'd been planning my humiliation for weeks. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried until my chest physically hurt. Until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. I cried for the marriage I'd thought we had. For the man I'd thought he was. For the baby we'd lost and the life we'd never build together. But somewhere around 3 in the morning, something changed. The tears stopped. My breathing steadied. And that cold, hard thing inside me grew stronger. I stood up, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and my face was puffy, but I was still here. Still standing. And I was done crying over a man who'd never deserved my tears. I was closing out our shared bank accounts when I discovered something I wasn't supposed to see. Colin's text messages were backed up to my laptop through our old shared cloud account. He'd forgotten to disconnect it. Or maybe he just didn't think I was smart enough to find it. The messages were all there. Hundreds of them. Conversations between Colin and his mother stretching back months. I started reading and my hands began to shake. "She's such a burden now," Diana had written. "You deserve better than someone who can't even take care of herself." Colin's response made my stomach turn. "You're right, Mom. She's not wife material anymore." I don't know what I was thinking. There were more. So many more. Diana calling me lazy, disgusting, and embarrassment. Colin agreeing with every single word. Planning how to push me out before our anniversary so he wouldn't have to split more assets. I sat there reading for hours. And with every message, that cold thing inside me grew stronger. I didn't cry. I just copied every single conversation. Saved them. Backed them up in 3 different places. Then I closed the laptop and smiled. I could have exposed them immediately. Could have sent those messages to everyone we knew. Could have ruined them both right then and there. But I didn't. Something told me to wait. To be patient. To think this through carefully. They wanted to see me broken and desperate. They wanted me to beg and cry and make a scene. So I would let them think they'd won. I would let them believe I was too weak and too stupid to fight back. I would let them get comfortable in their victory. And then, when they least expected it, I would show them exactly what I was capable of. They want to see me destroyed, I said to my reflection that night. So I'll let them think I am. Until I'm not. I started making plans. Quiet plans. Careful plans. Plans they would never see coming. Because the one thing Colin and Diana had never understood about me was this. I wasn't weak. I was just kind. And there's a big difference between those two things. They were about to learn that difference the hard way. My first day at the gym was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. People stared at me as I walked in. I could see them judging my body, my clothes, the way I moved. I wanted to turn around and leave immediately. But then a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile approached me. "First time here?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "I'm Sophie," she said. "I'm a trainer here. Want some help getting started?" For the next hour, Sophie showed me around. She taught me how to use the machines. She explained form and breathing and rest days. She never once made me feel stupid or ashamed. As we finished, she put her hand on my shoulder and looked me straight in the eyes. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "You're not weak. You're not broken. You're just starting over. And starting over takes more courage than most people will ever have." I went home that night and cried again. But this time, they weren't sad tears. They were something else. Something that felt almost like hope. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Hayes the following week. She was older, with gray hair and a calm presence that made me feel safe enough to tell the truth. "Tell me about your marriage," she said in our first session. And I broke down. I told her everything. How Diana had slowly replaced me as Colin's confidant. How every decision in our marriage had required his mother's approval. How I'd felt like I was married to both of them, but only one of them wore the ring. "It's like I was never enough," I said, wiping my eyes. No matter what I did, she always found something wrong with me. And he always took her side. Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. "It sounds like you were in a relationship with someone who never really left home," she said. Someone who valued his mother's opinion more than his wife's humanity. That one sentence cracked something open inside me. Because she was right. Colin had never really chosen me. He'd chosen his mother's approval. And I'd just been the woman unfortunate enough to get in the way. Dr. Hayes asked me to talk about the miscarriage in our third session. I'd been avoiding it, but she said we couldn't move forward without addressing it. So I told her. How I'd been 12 weeks pregnant when I lost the baby. How excited I'd been, how terrified, how full of hope. And how Colin had barely reacted when the doctor told us. He'd just nodded and said, "It's probably for the best." We weren't really ready anyway. Diana had been even worse. She'd shown up at the hospital with flowers and that same fake smile. "Maybe it's for the best, dear," she'd said, echoing her son's words. You weren't ready. And, honestly, with your current state, motherhood might have been too much for you. I'd been too numb with grief to respond. Too broken to fight back. But now, sitting in Dr. Hayes' office, I felt that cold anger rising again. They'd taken my grief and used it as another weapon against me. Another way to make me feel like I was the problem. Like my body failing me was somehow proof that I was worthless. I would never forgive them for that. Never. I moved into a tiny apartment 2 weeks later. It was on the 3rd floor of an old building with creaky stairs and thin walls. The kitchen was barely big enough to turn around in. The bathroom had tiles that were probably older than I was. But it was mine. All mine. No Colin. No Diana. Just me and my freedom. The first night alone, I tried to cook dinner and burned everything. The smoke alarm went off, and I had to wave a towel under it for 5 minutes to make it stop. I stood there in my tiny kitchen surrounded by smoke and ruined food, and I started laughing. Really laughing, for the first time in months. Because this disaster was mine. This mistake was mine. This life, however messy and imperfect, was finally mine. I ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor because I didn't have furniture yet. And as I looked around my empty, smoke-filled apartment, I whispered, "It's mine. Finally mine." And I meant every word. 3 months passed. 3 months of therapy sessions and gym workouts and learning how to be alone without being lonely. 3 months of crying and healing and slowly putting myself back together. One morning, I looked in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I hadn't lost much weight yet. Maybe 10 pounds, 15 at most. But something about me looked completely different. My eyes were clearer. My shoulders were straighter. My jaw was set with determination instead of hanging with defeat. The weight loss wasn't really about the numbers on the scale. It was never really about that. It was about reclaiming my body as mine. About proving to myself that I was strong enough to change. About taking back the power that Colin and Diana had spent years convincing me I didn't have. I flexed my arm and saw actual muscle definition for the first time in years. Sophie had been right. I wasn't weak. I was just starting over. And I was doing a damn good job of it. I ran into Colin at the grocery store 4 months after he'd left. I was in the produce section, reaching for apples, when I heard his voice behind me. "Lydia?" I turned around slowly. He was standing there with his cart, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe. Or something close to it. His eyes traveled down my body and back up again. "You look different," he said. "Not better. Not good. Just different." Like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Diana's words echoed in my head from that awful day in the kitchen. "He'll move on before you ever do. You'll be alone forever while he finds someone better." But looking at Colin now, seeing the dark circles under his eyes and the way his shirt was wrinkled, I realized something important. He didn't look happy. He didn't look like someone who'd made the right choice. He looked tired and lost and small. I smiled at him, calm and genuine. "Take care, Colin," I said. Then I walked away without looking back. And it felt incredible. 2 weeks after that encounter, I got an email that changed everything. It was from a wellness startup called Thrive Forward. They'd seen my social media posts about my journey, about learning to love myself again after loss and betrayal. They wanted to offer me a job. "We're launching a new campaign focused on women's confidence and resilience," the email said. "Your story is exactly the kind of authentic voice we need. Would you be interested in heading up our brand outreach?" I read that email 5 times before it felt real. They were offering me a real position with real money. More money than I'd made at my old job. They wanted me to help other women find their strength. They wanted me to take all my pain and turn it into something meaningful. The irony wasn't lost on me. Colin and Diana had spent so much time convincing me I was worthless. And now a company wanted to pay me to help women realize their worth. I accepted the job immediately. And when I did, I felt another piece of myself click back into place. 3 months into my new job, I received an unexpected email. The sender was a journalist named Alex Turner from a local investigative news site. "I'm working on a story about Diana Whitaker and her family business," the email said. "There have been some concerning reports about ethics violations and questionable practices. I understand you were married to her son. Would you be willing to talk?" I stared at that email for a long time. Diana's family business was her pride and joy. She'd built her entire identity around being a successful, respected businesswoman in our small town. She used her influence to control everything and everyone around her. If there was a scandal brewing, it would destroy her. Part of me wanted to respond immediately. To tell Alex everything. To hand over those text messages and watch Diana's world burn. But I didn't. Not yet. I saved Alex's contact information and wrote back saying I'd think about it. Because I was learning that revenge was better when it was perfectly timed. When your enemy never saw it coming. So I would wait. Just a little longer. The invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. Heavy cardstock, expensive printing, elegant script. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Colin Monroe's new beginning," it read. The party was being hosted by Diana at her house. The same house where she'd told me countless times that I wasn't good enough for her son. The invitation was addressed just to me. No +1. They were making sure I knew I'd be alone. That I'd have to walk in there and face them both, face all our old friends, face everyone who knew my marriage had failed. A mutual friend called me that night. "I can't believe Diana actually invited you," she said. "That's so tacky. You don't have to go, you know. No one would blame you." But as she talked, I felt that cold determination settling in my chest again. I looked at the invitation one more time. Looked at the date. 2 weeks away. "Actually," I said slowly, "I think I will go." Because I had plans now. Plans that were finally ready to be put into motion. And Diana's party was going to be the perfect stage. I went dress shopping the next day. I tried on at least 15 different dresses before I found the right one. It was a sleek navy gown that hugged my body in all the right places. Not tight, not revealing, just perfectly elegant. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back at me was confident, strong, beautiful. Not despite the weight I still carried, but regardless of it. The saleswoman smiled. "You look stunning," she said. "Special occasion?" "You could say that," I replied. I bought the dress along with new shoes and a small clutch. That night, I stood in my apartment wearing the gown, looking at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman in the mirror looked like someone who knew her worth. Someone who couldn't be broken by cruel words or public humiliation. Someone who'd taken her pain and turned it into power. I whispered to my reflection, "I'm not the woman he left anymore." And for the first time, I truly believed it. I was someone better. Someone stronger. Someone they would never see coming. The morning of Diana's party, I sent 2 carefully crafted emails. The first went to my divorce lawyer. Attached were all the text messages between Colin and Diana. Every cruel word. Every insult. Every detailed plan they'd made to push me out of the marriage before our anniversary. "Please review these for any legal implications regarding the divorce settlement," I wrote. "I believe they demonstrate premeditation and possible fraud." The second email went to Alex Turner, the journalist. I included the same screenshots along with a detailed timeline. "This is what happens when a woman's worth is measured by her appearance," I wrote. "This is what manipulation and cruelty look like in text form. I'm ready to talk now." But I think the texts speak for themselves. I set both emails to send at exactly 8 o'clock that evening. Right when Diana's party would be in full swing. Right when Colin would be giving his speech about new beginnings. Then I got dressed, did my makeup, and looked at myself one final time in the mirror. I was ready. For justice. For closure. For the moment they'd both been dreading without even knowing it was coming. I arrived at Diana's house at 7:30. The driveway was full of expensive cars. The house was lit up like something from a magazine. I could hear laughter and music drifting through the open windows. For just a moment, standing at the door, I felt my courage waver. Then I remembered every cruel word Diana had said to me. Every time Colin had chosen his mother over me. Every moment they'd made me feel worthless. I rang the doorbell. Diana herself answered. The moment she saw me, her face went completely white. Then bright red. "Lydia," she said, her voice tight. "You weren't actually invited." I smiled sweetly. "I know. But I came anyway." I stepped past her into the foyer. Conversations stopped as people noticed me. Heads turned. Whispers started. Colin appeared from the living room, a drink in his hand. When he saw me, he froze completely. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Beautiful party, Diana," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Then I walked into the crowd, head high, smiling like I owned the place. Because tonight, in a way, I did. Colin started his speech at exactly 8 o'clock. He stood in the center of Diana's living room, surrounded by friends and family, and began talking about new beginnings and second chances. "Sometimes life gives you a wake-up call," he said. "Sometimes you realize that what you thought you wanted wasn't actually making you happy." I stood at the back of the room, watching him. Watching Diana beside him, beaming with pride. Then it happened. Colin's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it and kept talking. Then Diana's phone buzzed. Then someone else's. And another. Within seconds, half the room was checking their phones. I watched as faces changed from curious to shocked to horrified. People started whispering urgently. Someone gasped. Alex Turner's article had just gone live. Local businesswoman Diana Whitaker exposed in body-shaming scandal was trending on social media. The article included screenshots of every text message, every cruel word, every manipulative plan, and it was spreading like wildfire. Colin stopped mid-sentence, staring at his phone. The color drained from his face. Diana grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with panic. I just smiled and took a sip of my wine. The room erupted into chaos. People were reading the article aloud to each other in disbelief. Diana's business sponsors started calling. I could hear her phone ringing constantly as she fled to another room. Colin just stood there frozen, reading the messages on his screen over and over. Several of Diana's business partners were at the party. I watched as they made their excuses and left quickly, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the scandal. One of Diana's biggest sponsors called her right there in front of everyone and told her they were pulling their funding immediately. Guests started whispering behind their hands. Some were sympathetic. Most were shocked. A few were clearly enjoying the drama. Colin finally spotted me at the back of the room. He stormed over, his face red with anger. "Did you do this?" he demanded. I looked at him calmly. "I didn't do anything, Colin. I just stopped hiding what you did." "You've ruined everything," he hissed. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't lose me. You threw me away. There's a difference." Then I set down my wine glass, turned around, and walked out of that house for the last time. The news spread fast. By the next morning, the local TV stations had picked up the story. Socialite Diana Whitaker exposed for body-shaming daughter-in-law was the headline on every channel. The article had been shared thousands of times. People were angry. They were calling Diana cruel and calling Colin weak. Several women had come forward with their own stories about Diana's behavior. About the way she'd treated them, judged them, made them feel small. I got dozens of calls from reporters wanting interviews, wanting me to tell my side of the story, wanting me to give them more details, more drama, more pain. I declined every single one. I'd already said everything that needed to be said. The text messages spoke for themselves. I didn't need to add anything more. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I wasn't interested in watching them suffer. I'd told my truth. The rest was up to them to deal with. I turned off my phone and spent the day in my apartment, reading a book and drinking tea. And for the first time in over a year, I felt completely at peace. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Birds chirping, cars passing, life happening all around me. I got up, made coffee, and sat on my small balcony. The air was cool and fresh. My phone was still off. I had no idea what was happening in Diana and Colin's world anymore, and I realized I didn't care. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't celebrating their downfall. I was just breathing freely for the first time in years. All those months of carrying their cruelty around like a weight on my shoulders, and now it was gone. I'd released it, given it back to them. Let them carry the burden of their own actions. A neighbor walked by and waved up at me. "Beautiful morning," she called. "Beautiful morning," I agreed. And I meant it. Because it was beautiful. Not because of what had happened to Diana and Colin, but because I was finally free of them. Finally able to exist without their judgment hanging over me like a dark cloud. 2 weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that Colin had lost his job. Diana's scandal had damaged her family business so badly that the company had folded. Colin, who'd worked there in a senior position, was now unemployed. His mother, who'd controlled his life for so long, was now too busy dealing with lawsuits and public disgrace to interfere. He called me several times, left voicemails that I never listened to, sent emails that I deleted without reading. I didn't block him because I wasn't afraid anymore. I just wasn't interested. There was nothing he could say that would change anything. Nothing he could do that would undo the damage. He'd made his choice. He'd chosen his mother's cruelty over his wife's humanity. He'd chosen comfort over courage. And now he had to live with that choice. I heard later that he'd moved back in with Diana. That they were both living in her house, both dealing with the consequences of their actions. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just nothing. They were no longer part of my story. They were just people who used to know me. 6 months after Diana's disastrous party, I hosted my own celebration. Not a party, exactly. Just a small gathering with the people who'd supported me through everything. Sophie from the gym. Dr. Hayes. My coworkers from Thrive Forward. A few real friends who'd stuck by me. We met at a nice restaurant downtown. I'd reserved a private room. We ate good food and drank good wine and laughed until our sides hurt. As dessert was being served, Sophie raised her glass. "I want to make a toast," she said. To Lydia, who took the worst betrayal imaginable and turned it into the best revenge possible. Not by destroying anyone, but by refusing to be destroyed. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. I felt tears prickling at my eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "You didn't just survive," Sophie continued. "You turned your pain into purpose. You helped so many women through your work. You proved that strength isn't about being perfect. It's about refusing to stay broken." We clinked glasses and drank. And I realized something important. This was my real anniversary. Not the wedding anniversary Colin and I would have celebrated, but the anniversary of the day I signed my freedom. The day I chose myself. Diana showed up at my apartment one evening without warning. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted her sent away. I almost said yes. Almost told him to never let her near me again. But something made me say, "Let her come up." She knocked softly on my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. She looked older, thinner, fragile somehow. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide how defeated she looked. "Lydia," she said quietly. "May I come in?" I stepped aside and let her enter. We stood in my small living room, this woman who'd once seemed so powerful and me, the woman she'd tried to destroy. "You ruined us," Diana said, her voice shaking. "My business is gone. My reputation is destroyed. Colin can't find work anywhere because of what you did." I looked at her steadily. My voice was calm when I spoke. "No, Diana. You ruined yourself. I just stopped helping you hide it." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "You spent years being cruel. Years tearing me down. You taught your son that love was conditional. That worth was measured in pounds and inches. You did this. Not me." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out without another word. I stood in my apartment that night, looking around at the life I'd built. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I'd imagined when I was younger and believed in fairy tales. But it was mine. Completely, absolutely mine. I walked to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I'd kept one last thing from my marriage. An old wedding photo. Colin and me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. I looked at the girl in that photo, so young and hopeful. So sure that love would be enough. I set the photo face down in the drawer and closed it. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was strong, confident, whole. She'd been betrayed and broken and torn apart. And she'd put herself back together, piece by piece, into something better. I whispered to my reflection, they said I wasn't wife material. That I'd let myself go. That I wasn't good enough. I smiled. Good. Because I was never meant to be someone's project. I was never meant to be shaped and judged and controlled. My voice grew stronger. I was meant to be my own story. And this story? This one has a happy ending. I turned off the light and went to bed. And I slept better than I had in years.